The folder hit the marble floor before anyone said a word. Papers burst open like a flock of startled birds, sliding under leather sofas, spinning under heels, fanning out across 60 feet of polished stone in full view of 30 people who all had somewhere better to be. A share transfer agreement, a visitor authorization card, and the private financials of a woman who owned 51% of the building quietly scattered themselves across a lobby that had just decided she did not belong there. Nobody moved to help. Nobody even blinked, except one barista at the far end of the espresso counter, who set down a milk jug, pressed her lips together, and began to walk. Her name was Seo Yun, and she was 19 credit hours from a business degree. But in that moment, she was just the only person in a glass tower on the Han River waterfront who had enough spine to cross a lobby. That is where this story ends. It is also almost where it begins. But to understand what happened at the front desk of Hanrim Capital on a bitter Tuesday morning in February, you have to go back to a quiet apartment 3 hours earlier, where a woman in a wheelchair was standing in front of a closet, deciding who she wanted to be. Her name was Yemi Baek. She was 41 years old, and she had been answering that question, "Who do you want to be today?" for a long time. Born in Lagos to a Nigerian father and a Korean mother, Yemi had grown up speaking 3 languages at the dinner table and learning early that the world would never quite know where to file her. 2 Nigerian for Seoul, 2 Korean for Lagos, 2 black for the rooms her education eventually opened, and 2 credential for the room she was supposed to stay in. She had managed all of it with the same tool: work, precision, relentless, unglamorous work. At 26, she had been the sharpest credit analyst at a mid-sized investment firm in Incheon, the woman the senior partners called when numbers stopped making sense. She had a gift for spotting value inside companies other people were giving up on, a kind of financial instinct that older men in the room kept attributing to luck because the alternative made them uncomfortable. Then, on a wet February morning 9 years ago, 9 years almost to the day, which she had noticed this morning and chosen not to dwell on, a cargo truck ran a red light on the Olympic Darrow Expressway, and her car folded like paper. She woke up 4 days later to fluorescent light and a doctor whose face told her everything before his mouth did. She would never walk again. The firm sent flowers, then a settlement, then silence. Colleagues who had CC'd her on everything stopped. Conference calls she had organized started happening without her. The severance was generous and the goodbyes were warm. And somehow that made the loneliness worse, the way a polite funeral makes grief harder to place. So Yemi had done the only thing she knew. She worked. From the kitchen table of the apartment she retrofitted for her wheelchair, she built a small fund with her settlement money and the sharp intelligence nobody at her old firm had thought to steal before they let her go. She studied failing companies and found the ones that were failing in interesting ways. She bet on founders nobody had heard of. She moved slowly and quietly, never giving interviews, never attending the galas, letting the numbers speak in the only language that actually mattered in finance: returns. One good call became 5. 5 became a portfolio that quietly beat the market for 7 consecutive years. The name Baek Capital appeared in enough wire transfers and legal filings that it became known in certain circles, the way a fixed R is known, not bright enough to draw the eye, but always exactly where you need it to be. Very few people in those circles knew the woman behind it. She rolled instead of walked. She wore the same 4 suits in rotation. She had not been photographed at an industry event in 6 years. And when someone finally did manage to place her at a table, they were always slightly shocked, as though they had expected the name Baek Capital to belong to a taller person. That was deliberate. 7 days ago, in a conference room on the 28th floor of a building she would shortly own more than anyone, Yemi had signed the largest deal of her career. 51% of Hanrim Capital, controlling interest. The kind of acquisition that would run in the business papers for a week. The kind that ended careers for the people on the wrong side of the wire transfer. The announcement was scheduled for Monday at 10 in the morning, which gave her one window, one Tuesday, where she could walk, roll into that building as nobody in particular. Her grandmother, a woman who had raised 6 children in Busan on a fish seller's income and outlived 4 husbands, used to say, "A house shows its character to the stranger at the door. The family already inside will tell you it is beautiful. The stranger will tell you the truth." Yemi wanted the truth about Hanrim Capital before her name went on the glass. So she reached right in her closet, past the armor, the Italian wool blazers, the silk blouses that made bank managers sit up straighter when she rolled in, and pulled out the old gray cardigan. Soft at the elbows. Thrift store origin. A garment she kept the way some people keep an old photograph. Not because it was beautiful, but because it remembered something. She tucked a leather document folder beside her hip, pulled on knit gloves, and rolled out into the Han River wind. The cold came off the water like a judgment. Sharp, gray, indifferent. She had grown to love it. The tower that housed Hanrim Capital rose 42 floors above the Udo Financial District, a column of glass and pale granite that caught the February sky and turned it silver. Brass lettering arched over the entrance. Through the revolving doors, a water feature ran floor to ceiling over dark stone, filling the lobby with the murmur of something expensive pretending to be natural. Behind the front desk stood Jia Kwan, 38 years old, 13 years with the firm, the woman who had turned reception into an art form and an empire simultaneously. She arranged fresh white chrysanthemums beside her monitor every morning at 7:45, each stem measured and deliberate. She knew every executive's coffee order. She knew which junior associates were sleeping with which senior ones, and had leveraged that information exactly twice, quietly, without leaving fingerprints. She also ran the lobby the way a customs officer runs a border, with rules that were technically neutral and applied with tremendous selectivity. When a fund manager in a camel coat pushed through the revolving doors, Jia's smile came up before he cleared the turnstile. "Good morning, Director Park. Your guest is already upstairs." When a deliver man tracked sleet across the marble 2 minutes later, the same mouth, the same face, produced a single finger pointed toward the service entrance. No words, none needed. It was 9:03 in the morning when she looked up and saw the wheelchair. The woman was coming through the side entrance, the accessible door off the ramp that Jia had mentally flagged as a visual nuisance since the building installed it 4 years ago. The access ramp itself was partially blocked today by a freestanding advertisement display. Chrome frame, backlit panel, the kind of promotional piece the building's leasing team left wherever there was foot traffic, which apparently now included the only ramp. The woman in the wheelchair had moved the sign herself. Jia watched her drag it aside with both hands, inch by inch, while people in the revolving doors stepped past her without breaking stride. One man in a wool overcoat nearly walked into the sign she had moved and caught himself and kept walking, apparently unbothered by having almost tripped over the person who just cleared his path. By the time the wheelchair rolled across the lobby threshold, the woman's gloves were visibly damp and her jaw was set in the particular way of someone who has decided not to let anything land. Jia looked at her the way a gallery curator looks at something brought in from the pavement. She did not stand. She did not speak. She waited for the woman to cross 60 feet of marble and do it herself. Yemi stopped at the desk. The counter rose nearly to her chin from the seated position. She had been navigating a world designed for standing people for 9 years. She knew exactly how to adjust her posture to make herself visible over a high surface, but it always cost something, some small expenditure of dignity that people on the other side of the counter never seemed to notice because they weren't the ones paying it. "Good morning," she said. "Yemi Baek. I have a 9:30 meeting on the 32nd floor." Jia Kwan looked at her for a long, deliberate moment, the kind of moment designed to communicate something without being documentable. "Sweetheart," she said, "the welfare assistance office is 3 blocks east. We don't handle applications here." The lobby didn't quite stop, but it slowed. A man at the espresso bar lowered his cup. 2 young associates by the elevators exchanged a look. Someone's phone drifted upward, casual and practiced. Yemi kept her voice level. "I'm not looking for the welfare office. 32nd floor, please. 9:30 appointment. A meeting." Jia let the words settle into the air like a question mark. 32nd floor is executive territory, Han, board directors, partners. Her eyes made a slow, deliberate journey from Yemi's knit hat to her damp wheels. "If you think someone invited you, you're welcome to check the visitor list. My name is Baek. Baek. Jia did not look at her monitor. She examined one nail, then another. "I'm not typing anything for you. This lobby serves clients. not people looking for handouts. The words fell louder than they needed to. Possibly louder than Jia intended. Possibly exactly as loud. Either way, the espresso machine chose that moment to hiss, and the sound it made was the sound of the room holding its breath. Somewhere behind Yemi, a man let out a single low chuckle. The heat came up the back of her neck, the way it always did, the way 9 years had not fully trained away. 9 years of moments like this had taught her exactly what her anger cost and what it bought. She breathed in through her nose. She filed it. The desk clock reading 9:07. The camera above the reception blinking its small red eye. The sign she had dragged off the ramp still visible through the glass door, leaning where she had left it. She reached into her folder and placed a cream-colored card on the counter. Hanrim Capital letterhead. Visitor authorization. 32nd floor. 9:30 a.m. Signed by outgoing chairman Cho Jianwoo himself. Jia picked it up the way someone picks up something wet. Her eyes never dropped to read it. She turned it over, placed it face down on the marble, and patted it twice slowly. Anyone can print a card, she said. We had a man 3 weeks ago with a very convincing security badge. Made it all the way to the 14th floor before he walked out with 2 laptops and a junior analyst laptop bag. So you'll forgive me for not rolling out the welcome mat. A pause, perfectly timed. Or rolling anything out, I suppose. The associates laughed that time. Out loud. Not carefully. Jia's expression warmed the way performers do when they find their audience. At the far end of the espresso counter, Seo-yun stopped wiping the steam wand and set it down. She was 24. She had worked this lobby for 2 years. She had watched Jia Kwon sort human beings like incoming mail for both of them, and she had learned exactly when to look at the counter and when to look away, and she had a list of things she was not proud of. Something about the woman in the wheelchair, the stillness of her, the way she had not flinched once, made the list feel heavier than usual. Seo-yun poured a glass of cold water, came around the bar, and crouched beside the wheelchair. Here, she said quietly. Long roll in from that cold. Thank you. The woman took the glass. Her hands were steadier than Seo-yun expected. Seo-yun. Jia's voice came across the lobby like a ruler on a desk. We do not serve people who have not been cleared. Return to your station. That's your second warning this month. Seo-yun's jaw went tight. She gave the woman in the wheelchair an apologetic look and retreated. But she did not go far. She stayed at the end of the bar with her hand near her apron pocket and her eyes on the desk. Yemi set the glass on the lower counter ledge. I'd like you to call Chairman Cho's office, she said. They're expecting me. Something moved behind Jia's eyes. Not doubt. Closer to recalculation. Cho Jianwoo's name was not nothing at this desk. But 13 years of guarding this lobby had built a simple arithmetic in Jia's mind. The cost of being unkind to a nobody was 0. And everything about this woman still read nobody. Chairman Cho, she repeated, almost amused, is expecting you personally. That's right. Let me guess. He met you at one of his community outreach events. Shook your hand, said come by any time. And you actually, a slow shake of the head, showed up. She leaned slightly forward. Mom. Men like him say that the way people say bless you when someone sneezes. It doesn't mean you sneeze your way into the boardroom. Call his office, Yemi said. 2 minutes and I'll be out of your way. The reasonableness of it was, somehow, the most infuriating thing Jia had heard all morning. People like this were supposed to get loud. They were supposed to look embarrassed and leave. This one simply sat there in her damp cardigan and her worn wheels, asking to be treated like a client, in front of everyone, without raising her voice. Jia leaned over the high counter so she could look down. I'm not interrupting the chairman's schedule for a woman who rolled in off the street with a printed card and a story. Her voice dropped to a register that the lobby could still hear perfectly. You can wheel yourself back out through that door, or I can have you removed. Those are your options. Sweetheart, you're refusing to make one phone call. I am protecting this firm. A pause. Some of us work for our money. The woman by the leather sofas inhaled sharply. Even one of the associates stopped smiling. Yemi looked at Jia Kwon for a long moment. The water feature murmured. The chandelier dropped cold light across the marble between them. Okay, Yemi said quietly. She pulled the cream card back toward herself. I want your name. Excuse me? Your name. For my records. Yaha lekt. It was a real laugh. Head back, fully committed. My name? And who exactly are you filing a report with? She unclipped the gold nameplate from her blazer and held it up like a trophy. Yaha Kvon. 2 words. Make sure the spelling is right when you tell whoever is at the top of your very short list. Thank you, Yemi said. Spelling matters, especially on documents. Something in a way she said documents passed cold down the back of Jia's neck. She slapped it away with volume, picked up the desk phone, turned her face slightly aside, and spoke into it at lobby volume. Security to the front desk, please. We have a situation. She set the phone down and folded her hands and looked at Yemi with a warm, professional smile from the company brochure. You wanted me to make a call, she said. I made one. 32 floors above them. Coffee was being poured into Celadone cups for a board meeting that was supposed to begin in 18 minutes. Nobody up there had any idea that the majority shareholder of their firm was downstairs having her visitor card placed face down on the marble by a receptionist who had not yet learned what 51% meant. The man who crossed the lobby to the front desk was named Officer Kwok Sung-jin, 6 years in building security after 20 years in the military. He was broad-shouldered, deliberate, and possessed of a stillness that had always served him well in this job. A lobby where the closest thing to a real incident in 6 years had been a parking dispute between 2 fund managers over a single designated bay. He took one look at the scene. Woman in a wheelchair, folder on her lap, hands folded, face composed, and slowed down. Real trouble talked fast. Real trouble got loud and cited attorneys inside the first 30 seconds. This woman just sat there, and her silence was heavier than shouting. Jia came around the desk before he could form a question, heels clicking, voice pitching toward the seats behind him. This woman has been harassing me for 15 minutes. She claims she has a meeting upstairs. She's been trying to bluff her way in. She won't leave. Yemi's eyebrows rose slightly. Harassing. 15 minutes. Bluffing. The story had grown from nothing into architecture between one sentence and the next, and she watched it go up the way she had always watched bad numbers. Without surprise, just notation. Ma'am, Sung-jin said, turning to her. He was polite. He was tired. Is any of that accurate? No, she said. I have a 9:30 appointment with the board on the 32nd floor. I asked her to call Chairman Cho's assistant to confirm. She declined. Sung-jin glanced at Jia. Don't you dare. Jia's voice dropped a register. We do not contact the chairman's office for every story someone walks in with. The card is fake. I've already determined that. It is handled. The card is right here, Yemi said. No one has read it. Sung-jin reached for it. And that was when Jia Kwan decided this needed to move faster. She reached past him, snatched the leather folder off Yemi's lap, and held it over the desk. Let's see what's actually in here, she announced. Since we're doing show and tell. Give that back. Yemi's voice changed. Low. Flat. The voice of a woman running out of patience, like a clock running out of minutes. Jia shook the folder upside down. Papers exploded across the marble. They slid under the sofas. They spun under dress shoes. One page cartwheeled into the base of the water feature. A pen rolled against Sung-jin's boot. The lobby went very still. One document came to rest face up, dead center of the floor. Heavy cream paper. Embossed header. Bold type across the top. Hanrim Capital Holdings. Share transfer agreement. Confidential. Nobody read it. The man in the wool overcoat who had nearly walked into the ramp sign outside wandered past it on his way to the elevator, clocked the word confidential, glanced at his phone, and kept walking. Some people are extras in every scene they enter. Jia tossed the empty folder onto the desk. Junk mail and printouts, she said. Just like I thought. Yemi looked at her papers spread across 60 feet of Hanrim Capital's lobby floor. 9 years of transactions had taught her that rage was a currency. You spent it wrong, and you lost everything you were trying to protect. You spent it right, and it still cost you something you could not get back. So she put her hands on her wheels and began collecting her documents one by one. She had to lean far over the side of the chair for each page. Reach, strain, grip. Her shoulders, already burning from the ramp, sent fire up her neck with every stretch. She kept her face smooth. She had stopped letting strangers watch her hurt a long time ago. Every dip of her body was visible to 30 people. Not one of them moved, except Siyun, who was across the lobby in seconds, down on her knees, gathering pages. Touch one page, Jia said, her voice arriving like a slap. And I am writing you up right now. Assisting a trespasser. That's termination, Seo Yun. I will do it today. Seo Yun froze. 2 sheets in her hand. 19 credit hours from her degree. Rent due on Friday. She looked at Yemi. It's all right, Yemi told her. Her voice was soft. Put them down. Seo Yun set the pages where Yemi could reach them. Then, still kneeling with her back to the desk, she dropped her voice to just above nothing. I texted Lauren, Mr. Cho's assistant. She buys a dirty chai from me every morning at 8:50. She always reads it. Yemi's hands paused on the wheels for one breath. Then we wait, she whispered. Go protect your job. You've already done more than enough. Jia had retrieved her phone. She held it sideways now, recording, her voice sharpened for an invisible audience. You see this? This is the performance. They make a scene, then they bring a lawyer. I've watched this play out more times than I can count. She zoomed in on the wheelchair. And look at this. Duct tape on the armrest. Mud on the spokes. If you're going to bluff your way into a building like this, at least come with better props. A pause for the camera. This is what protecting the firm looks like. You do your job, you hold the line, and this is the thanks. People will fabricate anything. Meetings, disabilities, credentials, anything. I've seen it all. A few other phones were out now. Filming Yaha. Filming Yemi. The internet was assembling itself frame by frame, and nobody in the lobby understood yet what they were building. Sungjin shifted his weight. Something in him was itching and had been itching for several minutes. He had watched Yemi collect every page without once raising her voice. He had watched her speak to the barista with more grace than most executives showed their assistants. He had watched Jia perform for her phone with the energy of someone who had forgotten that the ceiling cameras did not require an audience to record. Jia, he said quietly, maybe I just walk her out, clean and simple. Or maybe we make the call upstairs. One call, she repeated, her voice dropping into the register of something inevitable. Sungdin, do you understand what happens if we ring the chairman's office during a board meeting over this? She let the sentence do its work. That is both our jobs. Is she worth your pension? It was a lie wearing a life jacket. Sensible, watertight, impossible to argue with in the moment. Sungjin's doubt lost to his mortgage. He exhaled. He walked behind the wheelchair. Ma'am, he said, I'm going to need you to leave the building. Please don't make this harder. Yemi set the last page in her folder and closed it. She looked up at him. Not at Jia. At him. What's your name? She asked. Kwak Sungjin, Mom. Kwak Sungdin. She held his eyes. I want you to remember that you asked nicely. That's going to matter. Is she threatening you now? Jia stepped around the desk, phone still in hand. She had pulled up her dial pad and turned the screen toward Yemi, thumb over the call button like it was a weapon. Last chance. Leave on your own or leave with a police escort. Those are your options. You will remember this morning for a very long time, Yemi said. The cold went down Jia's neck again. She did not let it land. Out. She flung her arm toward the door. Sungjin, now. Or I press this and we do it the humiliating way. Sungjin exhaled through his nose. He walked behind the wheelchair. His hands hovered over the push handles. Don't push my chair, Yemi said. Quietly. Absolutely. Nobody pushes my chair. Ma'am, I'm sorry, Sungjin said, and his fingers closed around the handles. Across the lobby, the elevator chimed. The doors slid open, and someone began to run. The man running across the lobby of Hanrim Capital was Director Im Hyuntae, Chief Operating Officer, 51 years old, 23 years with the firm, a man whose reputation was built partly on the fact that he did not rush. He did not take stairs when there were elevators. He did not send emails marked urgent, unless the building was structurally compromised. His tie was over his shoulder. His glasses were in his fist. His face was the color of the marble he was running across. Stop. The word hit the lobby like a dropped tray. Sungjin froze with his hands on the chair. Get your hands off that chair. Im Hyuntae was still moving, still pulling air. He reached them and put his hands on his knees and breathed for 3 seconds. Then he straightened, turned to the lobby, and made it official. Everyone. His voice was steady now. The way a man who has just understood the size of a mistake makes his voice steady to contain it. This is Yemi Baek, founder of Baek Capital. He swallowed. As of last Tuesday, the majority shareholder of this firm. A pause. My boss. All of our bosses. Silence has a texture. This one was the water feature, suddenly enormous. It was an espresso machine ticking as it cooled. It was 30 people inhaling at the same moment and forgetting to do the second part. Jia Kwan's phone slipped out of her hand and cracked face down on the marble. Nobody looked at it. Everybody was doing the same arithmetic. 51%. Not a client. Not a guest. The majority owner. The largest chair at the table belonged to the woman they had been trying to roll out the door. Im Hyun-tae crouched beside the wheelchair, bringing himself to eye level. Up close, Yemi could see his hands were not entirely steady. Ms. Baek, I am profoundly sorry. We didn't know you were coming ahead of the announcement, and he stopped himself. Winced. No, there's no version of that sentence that helps anything. No, Yemi agreed. There isn't. Her eyes traveled past him across the marble to the leather sofa by the window. One of my pages is still under there. It went the farthest. You can start with that. Im Hyun-tae went down on his knees in his $3,000 suit in front of 30 people and reached under the sofa. When he stood, he was holding a single sheet of cream paper. He looked at it the way you look at something that explains everything. Share, transfer agreement, Hanrim Capital Holdings. And there, under purchaser, in capital letters, Yemi Baek. He carried it back the way someone carries something irreplaceable. Both hands careful. He placed it on her folder, stepped back, and finally allowed himself to look at the front desk. Every gaze in the lobby followed his. Jia Kwan had not moved. Her mouth had opened twice and produced nothing. The posture was gone. The performance, the audience management, all of it drained out of her like water through a cracked bowl. She looked smaller behind the counter, as if the marble itself had expanded. Ms. Baek. Her voice came out wrong, pitched too high. I didn't know. If someone had told me who you were. I know, Yemi said. That's the problem. One push of the wheels, forward, letting the words arrive in the space before her. You didn't need to know who I was. You needed to be decent to a stranger. The first costs nothing. You couldn't manage either. Jia turned to Im Hyun-tae. Sir. She refused to leave. I followed protocol. The security policy. Did the policy tell you to shake her documents on the floor? Im Hyun-tae's voice was quiet in the particular way of a man controlling something much larger than his voice. I watched the footage on the way down. For camera angles, Ja. For camera angles. The phrase moved through the lobby like cold air from an open door. The ceiling camera. The desk camera. The phones. The morning had been recorded from every direction, and every direction showed the same thing. Sung-jin stepped away from the wheelchair. His hands came off the handles the way hands come off something hot. Mong, I apologize. I should have made the call. It was one phone call. You should have, Yemi said. But you also asked nicely. Both things are true, Kwak Sung-jin. Both will be remembered. From the espresso bar came a sound nobody could blame her for. Seo-yun-oh, laughing once in her hand, eyes bright and wet. Im Hyun-tae checked his watch. 9:34. Ms. Baek. The board is waiting. They are, a small, careful breath, very eager to meet you. I imagine they are. She set her folder straight on her lap and turned her wheels toward the elevator bank. She paused once, mid-turn, and looked back at the front desk. Yaha Kwon. She said it evenly, the way someone quotes a document. Don't go far. Spelling matters, especially on documents. She rolled toward the executive elevator, and the lobby parted in front of her like water that had finally understood the direction it was supposed to run. The boardroom doors were already open. 14 people stood when she rolled in. Standing was easy now. Everyone could manage it suddenly. Chairman Cho Jian-woo came around the table first, silver-haired, well-tanned, and wearing this morning an expression caught somewhere between fury and shame. He took her hand in both of his. Yemi, the word cost him something. I sold you 51% of firm. I had no idea I was selling you a lobby like that. You didn't sell me the lobby, Jian-woo. She rolled past him toward the head of the table. You sold me the right to fix it. The meeting started at 9:38. 6 minutes late. Yemi's first agenda item was not on the deck. She called it item 0. Pull up the lobby cameras, she said. This morning, 9:03 to 9:34. All 4 angles. For the next several minutes, 14 of the most powerful people in Hanrim Capital watched their own front desk in silence. They watched the chrome advertising sign blocking the ramp. They watched the visitor card placed face down without being read. They heard beggars on wheels and crisp lobby audio. They watched the folder shaken open, and their newest majority shareholder leaning out of her chair to collect her documents from 60 feet of their marble floor, while employees filmed it for social media. Nobody spoke. One director put his hand over his mouth. The general counsel began taking notes with the accelerating speed of a woman calculating legal exposure. When the screen went dark, Yemi let the silence work for a while. Then she folded her hands. "I'm not going to begin our partnership with a lecture," she said. "The footage already gave it. I'll just tell you what happens next." She paused. "The employee at that desk is suspended effective this hour, pending formal review. Not dismissed in anger. Reviewed properly. We follow process even for people who didn't." Heads nodded. Downstairs, it was already moving. The HR director had slipped out during the footage. By 10:10, Jia Kwan was sitting in a small conference room with a paper cup of water and mascara tracking down her face. "I was doing my job," she kept saying. "You're all acting brand new about this. We read people at that desk every day. Every single day. The only difference is this one turned out to have money." It was the most honest thing she had said all morning. It was also a confession spoken in a building where she had recently learned the conference rooms had audio recording for compliance purposes. The HR director wrote it down. Sungjin's interview was at 10:45. He did not bring a union representative. He sat down, set his radio on the table, and told the complete truth. She asked for one call. "I should have made it." Jia said she'd been harassing her for 15 minutes. That wasn't accurate. I watched the timestamp on the cameras. Ms. Baek came through the side door at 9:05. Jia was already on her inside 90 seconds. He paused. "And Seoul, the barista. Don't let anything happen to her. She was the only person in that lobby who did what we were all supposed to do." Upstairs, the board moved through the actual agenda. Numbers, transitions, signatures. Then Chairman Cho rose for his final motion as outgoing chair. "I had planned to hand over operational control in June," he said. "I'm moving it effective today. I have spent 37 years building what this firm's name means in this industry. This morning I watched our lobby spend it like loose change." He looked at Yemi. "It belongs in better hands." The vote was unanimous. Even the directors who had privately questioned whether an outside shareholder should hold controlling interest raised their hands with something that looked like relief. At noon, Yemi rolled back through the lobby on her way out. The chrome sign was gone from the ramp. Someone had moved it in a hurry and leaned it behind the reception desk where it stood like evidence. Behind the counter, a nervous temp rearranged the chrysanthemums with the care of someone who had been warned. At the espresso bar, Seoul was restocking cups. Taped to the bar was a handwritten sign, "Chai on the house today." Yemi stopped, ordered one, and tipped 150,000 won. "I'll see you soon," she told Soyin. It sounded less like a farewell and more like a blueprint. The video went up at 12:40. Not Jia's video. That one had died with her cracked screen, and HR had bagged it as evidence. The one that went up belonged to a university student who had been waiting in the lobby for an internship interview. 23 years old, filming nervously for the small financial commentary account she ran from her dorm room. 44 seconds. It started with the folder being shaken upside down. It ended with a man in a suit sprinting across the lobby screaming that the woman collecting papers off the floor owned 51% of the company. The caption was 6 words. "Wait until you hear who she is." By dinner, it had 180,000 views. By Thursday, February 6th, million. By Friday, it was on the evening news, then the national morning programs, then every financial media outlet that had been asleep for 7 years on the story of Baek Capital and its unusually quiet founder. Strangers slowed the footage down and zoomed in on details. The card placed face down without being read. The duct tape on the armrest of a wheelchair that belonged to someone worth more than the building. The chai girl, kneeling when no one else and 30 people moved. The internet found names fast. But Hanrim Capital moved faster because it now had an owner who knew exactly how these stories ran. Yemi gave one statement on camera the following morning. No victory lap. No anger displayed for the audience. "What happened to me on Monday happens in lobbies, offices, waiting rooms, and front desks every single day," she said. "The unusual part is not what happened. The unusual part is that this time, the woman in the wheelchair owned the building. I'm more interested in what comes next than in what happened. Watch what we build. The formal review took 11 days because Yemi insisted it be done correctly. What it found was worse than one bad morning. For complaints against Jia Kwan in 5 years, each quietly handled by a manager who liked the way Jia brought order to the lobby and did not want to investigate how she maintained it. A job applicant with a guide dog turned away at the desk, told the position had been filled. It had not been filled for another 3 weeks. A courier with a stutter she had mimicked to a colleague within earshot of the man himself. And 16 written warnings issued to Seoul. Every single one log within 48 hours of Seoul having been kind to someone Jia had frozen out. The pattern sat in the file like a signature. Jia was terminated for cause on a gray Thursday morning. She cleared her desk while the temp watered her chrysanthemums. No escort. No public walk of shame. Yemi had been specific. Process, not spectacle. The consequences arrived anyway, the slow, honest kind. The premium staffing agency that had placed her at Hanrim dropped her within the week after 3 of its biggest clients called to ask questions. Front desks run on reputation. Hers now arrived in rooms ahead of her. She gave an apology on a podcast 6 weeks later when her severance negotiations stalled. She was sorry if people had been offended. She had been under tremendous pressure. She was, she said, the real victim of a rush to judgment by people who did not understand the demands of the role. The internet did not buy it. Neither did the severance board. The clip of her saying we profile people at that desk every day had already been read into the formal record. Some apologies are doors. Hers was a mirror. She never looked into it long enough to see what it showed. What Yemi did next surprised every journalist who had already begun drafting articles about the coming lawsuit. She had grounds. The general counsel confirmed it in a memo that was supposed to stay internal. Discrimination. Public humiliation. For camera angles and audio. She declined. Suing her gets me a settlement, she told the board. I don't need a settlement. I need the next woman who rolls into a lobby like this one to be treated like a person. Money doesn't do that. Training does. Hiring does. Herms do. Hanrim Capital announced the First Impressions Initiative, funded with $2 billion of firm capital and chaired by the majority shareholder. Every client-facing employee in the building retrained. Not a webinar. Real sessions with real people in wheelchairs, with canes, with service dogs, with accents, with thrift store blazers, sitting across the table and telling their stories. Every entrance audited. The chrome sign policy was abolished on the first day. Ramps widened. Counters lowered. The famous marble lobby was partially rebuilt that summer. The new front desk had a low wing where a seated visitor could look a receptionist level in the eye. The hiring pledge made the business section of every major paper. Within 1 year, 12% of Hanrim's new front of house hires would be people with disabilities. Within 3 years, every Hanrim office in the country. The program needed a director of guest experience to run the flagship lobby. The job description might as well have had a name already on it. Seoyin stopped pulling espresso shots in November. She started the new role the same week she finished her degree, at nearly 3 times her previous salary. Her first act in the role was framing a photograph of the wall behind the new low desk. A simple image of a glass of ice water sitting on a marble counter. Sungjin Kwok kept his job. The review board noted clearly that he had been deceived, that he had twice requested the phone call that would have resolved everything, and that he had walked into his interview and told the complete truth without being asked twice. He became something better than cleared. He became the person who tells the story. Every new security hire at Hanrim received the same speech on their first morning. 6 years from now, someone is going to walk through that door looking like nobody. Treat every single person like that's today. As for the man in the wool overcoat, the one who had stepped over Yemi's wheel on the ramp and kept walking, the internet found him too. He was a client. He was, shortly afterward, a former client. No one at Hanrim made that happen directly. The footage just made his own firm's board uncomfortable enough to move the account quietly elsewhere. Karma, Yemi noted privately, did not require her supervision. It only required cameras. In January, the city's leading business magazine put her on the cover. Not in the gray cardigan. In the armor, the charcoal blazer, the silk blouse, in front of the rebuilt lobby. The headline read, "The owner they tried to turn away." She kept a copy in her office. Not framed. In a drawer. She had not done any of it for the cover. But she allowed herself one small ceremony. The chrome advertising sign. The one that had been blocking the access ramp when she arrived. The one that read, in elegant letters, "Wealth has an address. Never return to the lobby." Facilities found it in storage with a sticky note in the owner's handwriting. Scrap it. Spend the money on heating for the ramp. Spelling matters. So do first impressions. 6 months later, on another Tuesday morning, snow came in off the Han again. The lobby of Hanrim Capital looked almost the same. Same waterfall, same chandelier, same 42 floors of glass over Yudo. Almost. The ramp outside was wider now and heated, and nothing stood on it but morning light. The new front desk curved low on one side, like an open hand. Behind it sat a receptionist named Park Joon, hired through the First Impressions Initiative. Her smile was real, and it was the same smile for everyone. At 9:06, the side door opened. An elderly woman came through slowly, leaning on a cane, snow on her coat shoulders. She looked up at the chandelier, the way people look at places they were not sure they were allowed to enter. For a moment, she seemed ready to apologize for being there. Yoon Wee Teo. Good morning. Come in and get warm. What can we do for you today? The woman explained, apologizing twice, that she had an appointment about a small pension account. Very small, she said. Probably not worth bothering anyone about. It's worth our time, Joan said, already typing. You're on the list. Can I bring you something warm while you wait? The chai is very good. 2 minutes later, the old woman sat by the waterfall with a warm cup in her hands, snow melting off her boots on a marble that had survived worse than weather. Nobody filmed her. Nobody would have a reason to. 32 floors up, Yemi Baek watched the lobby feed on the corner of her monitor. She did that some mornings, not checking for problems, just watching the experiment run. Her office had no motivational posters. On the shelf behind her desk sat 2 objects, a framed photograph of a glass of ice water and a cream-colored visitor authorization card, the one that had spent a morning face down on a marble counter, now mounted face up permanently. People sometimes asked her if she thought about that receptionist. She always gave the same answer. I think about the ramp, she said. People like her exist because buildings like that allow them. I couldn't fix her. I could fix the building. The deal had been worth a number the newspapers love to run. But ask anyone who was in that lobby on that February morning what the real story was, and they won't quote a figure. They'll tell you about a woman who was told she didn't belong in a building she already owned. And then they'll tell you what she did with the building afterward. Because the loudest response to cruelty is not a lawsuit, not a firing, not a viral clip. It's a wider door, a lower counter, a stranger with a cane being handed something warm before anyone has asked what she's worth. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs the reminder that you never know who is coming through the door. Like it so more people find it. Subscribe because there are more stories like this one, true to life in every way that matters, and every single one of them is waiting to be told. And drop your answer in the comments. If you had been standing in that lobby at 9:07 before anyone knew her name, what would you have done? The honest answers are always the ones worth reading. Until next time, keep the ramp clear.